Would you like me to use the microphone, or can I?
Microphone. You need
Yeah.
your-
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Deep breaths. Okay. This is an easy topic. We're talking about anger. Um, as as Graham was mentioning, we are Christian and Ruby Bossa. We have been married for 14 years now, and as some of you might know, we have a 7-year-old daughter named Olivia. We also have an almost 10-year-old dog named Panda. That's our whole family. We initially got connected with Venture Marriage of almost 3 years ago, as Graham was mentioning, during a season in our relationship, a challenging season in our relationship that started shortly after we had Olivia. We basically experienced a lot of disconnection, right, in our relationship. We're so thankful that we did find Venture Marriage, because through the community that we found here and through some of the tools that were presented to us, we were able to reconnect as a couple. And after experiencing that community and experiencing the benefit, the value that Venture Marriage presented to us, offered us, we decided to pay it forward. And so we became table leaders, and we would be here with you this season every weekend, if not for our little one, who after almost 2 years of spending nearly 4 to 5 hours in kids ministry and childcare, decided it was she had enough, and so we took a break this term. Before this term started, Graham and Carla approached us about and invited us to talk on this topic of anger. And we hesitantly said yes. Hesitantly, because this is an area, this is a topic that we are both individually still very much working through and struggling with. And we're also learning through how to resolve conflicts in our relationship. I think a couple of weeks ago, when Lori, Kate, and Cody were up here, I don't know how many of you were here for that presentation. We got up here and talked a little bit about our. We shared a little bit about our testimony. I mentioned that I am a stuffer. That's my anger profile. Ruby is a spear, and we also talked about an experience where we successfully applied the I statement tool. Which, how many of you are familiar with the I statement? I think most of us probably at this point are. Yeah. We use that tool to successfully resolve conflict. Today's topic, which touches on the meaning and application of appropriate anger, as well as the pitfalls of deep and unresolved anger, those have proven to be a little bit more of a struggle for me in particular. Where do I point this? Back, forward, down. There we go. Okay, so let's start with a quick question. What does it mean, or what does good and mad mean to you? This is going to be the interactive portion of the presentation. Yes. To be able to feel heard and not attacked by the other person. And not attack the other person. I love that. Craig. Good and mad means extremely mad. Yeah. Just dig your heels in. Just embrace that anger and just let her rip. Yeah, let her rip. I saw. Thank you, Craig. Craig is he's here every other week teaching Barrington Marriage. I think I saw a hand in the back. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so I heard good means to be honest and to be able to express yourself with love, and then mad. What was the last bit? One more time. Lie, to lie. Okay. So opposites. I think I heard opposites in that. Did I see another hand over here in this part of the room? No. Yes, go ahead. Ooh, I like that. Channel it constructively. Yeah, go ahead. Time to reflect. Yeah, very good. Um, who here? I briefly mentioned in my opening about our anger profiles. I'm just curious, who here inherited one of their two parents? I mean, there's a 66% chance that you did. So, who inherited their parents' anger profile? One of their parents' anger profile. Yeah, right. I mean, it's gonna be one of the two, right? I personally grew up in a household where anger was not necessarily modeled, for better or for worse. In fact, anger was considered sinful. Anger was considered bad, and sometimes even dangerous. I argue that I am a stuffer in part because of my own natural disposition. I'm primarily an introverted person. And I also argue that it's in part because of the environment that I grew up in. So embracing this view that Chip talks about in the book, that anger isn't bad, but rather a morally neutral emotion, that was completely game-changing for me. It was a pivotal realization for me. Chip emphasizes this other side of anger, this constructive, positive side of anger. He reminds us that anger is one of the most positive, effective weapons in the arsenal of God to bring about radical, righteous change. And he discusses his own experience. I think he talks about being in a laundromat and witnessing a mother toss her child against a dryer and feeling so enraged, so angry by that experience that he decided to build a local shelter for abused kids. Now that is a extremely positive example of how to constructively channel your anger. This is in stark contrast with what I often did as a stuffer, which is to suppress my anger, to turn it inward, and to often punish myself with guilt and with shame. So my default approach, as well as the spewer and the leaker approach, generally speaking, are not very conducive to long-term spiritual, psychological, or physical health. And nor are they conducive to bring about this kind of God-desired, radical, righteous change. Anger, like a tool, what I've learned from reading this book, can be used to do either harm or to do good. And regardless of the outcome, because of its motivating power, it's important for us to learn how to harness it. So the entire foundation for this section of Chip's book is Ephesians 4:26 to 27. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity for the devil. This is a working foundation, which Chip basically spends 4 chapters in the book unpacking. It's a very dense verse. And if you don't think it's a dense verse, then you haven't read the book. So I'm going to do my best in a very short amount of time to kind of unpack what Chip tells us about this verse. The first thing to note is be angry. How many of you here in the heat of a moment have heard your conflict partner tell you, don't be angry? Yeah. How helpful has that been? Super helpful? Anybody? Somewhat helpful? Usually it's not helpful at all.
Yes, I did that just yesterday.
Yeah, it's true. It's a conditional. If you say it before, then you're excused. Then you get a free pass. Go ahead. Ooh. Okay. Yeah. 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 I love how I love how we just highlighted how words have different meanings. Somebody else just say, "Yeah, that means the same thing." In the back. Don't act in anger. Yeah. Yeah, like don't act out. Do something right. Yeah. For those of you who are more familiar with the experience of anger, what does that sound like to you? Don't act out in anger? Is there a difference? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This, I mean, our personal experiences with this can take us to any one of the ends of the spectrum on this. But what I think comes up for me in those experiences, as Ruby was just mentioning, yesterday being one of them, when I am feeling a little bit angry and I hear "Don't be angry," it just feels invalidating. Yeah, especially when you feel justified in your anger. Now that's not an excuse to necessarily inappropriately act out in our anger, as we'll see in just a minute. But invalidating the emotion usually is not a recipe for successfully navigating that experience. So I appreciate that in this verse, you know, God affirms anger as a morally neutral emotion, and He invites us to experience it and express it. But notice also that the command to be angry comes with three conditions, right? Do not sin, do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. So God commands us to be angry, and then immediately He instructs us to, one, express our anger appropriately, and number two, to resolve it. And He does this, He instructs us to immediately resolve it because He knows that unresolved anger gives the enemy an open door into our heart. And perhaps some of you, like me, have personal experiences with unresolved anger, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. But I want to first give Ruby the opportunity to touch on what it looks like to express anger appropriately.
So, thank you. I used to think that be angry and do not sin is just not possible. It's a contradiction in one sentence. And I realized the season is because I never knew that anger can be appropriate or can be expressed appropriately. Chip says, appropriate anger is generated for the right reasons. It isn't born out of selfishness, pride, or insecurities. So the source of anger matters, right? There is a right reason and there's also a wrong reason. So before we get into what do you do when you have a right reason, we can first acknowledge that there are wrong reasons to be angry. Selfishness, pride, or insecurities are actually not the right reasons. And I think, as for me, I need a lot of grace from God and wisdom from the Holy Spirit to see when I'm angry for the wrong reasons. But when we do that, if we can recognize that in ourselves, then really the best method is actually to ask God for help to let it go, right? And to release it in a different way and not react in an unhealthy way. But suppose there's a right reason to be angry, which I think we can all think of something even recently. How should stuffers, spewers, and leakers appropriately express anger? Well, if you know about me and Christian by now, I'm a spewer leaker and he's a stuffer leaker. So between the two of us, we have the whole gamut covered of anger types. The good news is, at least to me, if doesn't matter what you are in your anger profile, there is another option, the fourth anger type. The fourth anger type is the appropriate way to express anger. And it starts with a message that you tell yourself, actually. And read it together with me, please, under the message. It's okay to be angry. It's what I do with it that matters. It's okay to be angry, but it is what I do with it that matters. That was very helpful for me to reflect on. For the suffers and leakers out there, right? It might mean to you is, what does it look like to give yourself space and permission to be angry? But for a spirit like me, it looks like asking myself, what does it mean to take a pause before I launch into action about being angry? And speaking of action, right, be assertive. It says be assertive. Now, that may be easier for some of us than others, but being assertive doesn't mean being combative. And that's very important. And then the next kind of recommendation that Chip made in the action part is one that's universally helpful for all of us, which is making non-threatening I statements. That we have shared an example of that a couple weeks ago in our testimony, and it's about the teak table for those of you who are around for that one. So I will actually refresh that statement again, and I'm reminding myself as well, for as effective as I statements are, I'm shocked that I don't use it as often as I should. So let me kind of read the statement that I made to Christian. It went like this. I feel ignored and not valued when I ask you to help me with restoring the teak table that brings me a lot of joy, but don't see you delivering your promise. I desire that you show in action that what matters to me matters to you. And by saying that, I got a date commitment to restore the teak table and an empathetic response from my husband. So it really worked. What? Read the statement again. Okay. All right. I feel ignored and not valued when I ask you to help me with restoring the teak table that brings me a lot of joy, but don't see you delivering on your promise. I desire that you show in action that what matters to me matters to you. And I think actually the way that you also make the statement, or the method in which you make the statement, also matters. In this case, knowing how he is, I sent him an email instead of doing it right in the moment verbally. And so it gave him some time to process and respond back. So next, reaction. This is the one that I think I presently struggle with the most. The spirit in me wants to take over, right? The Hulk comes out. For me, to be non-destructive means, what does it look like to not be yelling, to not be shouting? But for others out there, it might mean, what does it mean to not pretend or hide that you're angry? Or to say yes when you really mean a yes, and no when in your heart it's like a no way, right? I mean, there's different ways of how being non-destructive shows up, but the reaction, I think, is one that can be a struggle, because that tend to be our innate response. So all of this is not easy. It's super hard. It's really hard for me. But if you look at the results here, connection restored, grace and mercy given to each other, justice upheld. I mean, isn't that what we want? Isn't that the outcome we all want? Thank you, Athena. And we know that when we actually default to our natural anger profile, the outcome is damaged relationships, disconnection, even being in touch with your own emotions. It could be very damaging. I think when we practice this, we let God, this is a plug to 3 chairs. We don't give room to the accusers, and we let God be the judge in that situation. So I went through this very, very quickly, but there is a full table in the very back page of your handout that has the entire table that breaks down by anger types, and the fourth, your own type, and the fourth anger type. So I highly encourage you to take a look and relate to it. Expressing anger appropriately. is the means, but it is not the end. God commanded us to express anger, but he also commanded us to resolve anger. So we're going to get into that next.
All anger is not sinful, but it becomes sinful when it contradicts Scripture when it continues long. So Chip writes in the book that it's okay to be angry for a short while, and he even encourages us not to beat ourselves up for having honest emotions. But for our own sake and for the other party's sake, we need to deal with the anger. And there are two key things that he calls us to do here on how to resolve anger. And that is, one, resolve it quickly, and two, resolve it with determination. And the foundation, the basis for resolving your anger quickly comes from Matthew 5:22 through 25. I won't read the entire verse, but I'll read the section that speaks to resolving anger quickly. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court. To take a firm, determined stance is to make a commitment to yourself and to your spouse or the other person, if not your spouse involved in the conflict, not to basically go to bed angry, not to go to sleep with your anger. Now, there are also practical steps that you can take, things like using conflict resolution tools, which are also available to us to help us resolve conflict. And Ruby's actually going to walk us through a tool called Fighting Fair later in the presentation. But let's go back to why it's important to resolve anger, resolve it quickly. And I think I briefly mentioned earlier that, or alluded to earlier, that God knows that if we don't resolve our anger promptly, it will fester. And like a terminal disease, it will destroy us and eat us up inside. I have some personal experience with this. This is a hard part of the presentation for me. Let me tell you a brief experience that I had. So some years ago, after I finished grad school, I think I was about 2 years into my professional work experience. Things seemed to be going really well for me. I got on some really interesting projects. I was getting recognition, and I had good momentum going on in my professional work. And then, as is often the case in the technology industry, the layoffs started coming. And I remember after each round, more and more work was dumped on me. And, the whole environment at work just got really tense and really stressful. I felt mixed emotions about the entire thing because on the one hand, I was thankful that I wasn't part of the layoffs. On the other hand, I was also super frustrated about all the additional work that ended up being added to my plate. But being the stuffer that I am, I told myself, suck it up and be a team player, keep your head down, and keep churning through and grinding along. By the third round of layoffs, in about a 12 to 14 month window of time, my drive and my motivation started to bottom out. Getting up in the morning felt like a chore, and even simple tasks felt like moving mountains. So my my reward for surviving the layoffs up until that time was to be plucked out of the old business that I was in and dropped into this new business. So I was assigned to a new role, assigned a new team, and a new manager. None of it which I wanted or felt particularly interested in. To make matters worse, the new manager that I was working for, him and I just did not see eye to eye at all. So with all the organizational chaos, I asked if I could transfer into a different role. He first said he would think about it, and then he pulled a power move on me and just flat out refused to let me explore anything else. Suffice to say that I was pretty livid. I was furious. I felt really wronged, at the time. I felt that I had been a team player through all the chaos, and now somebody who barely knew me for a hot minute had full control over my career path. And man, the bitterness started to set in. I hated going to work. Hated it. And soon enough, the complaints about my attitude and my irritability started making their way back to my manager. Eventually, he called me into a meeting. And it was after stuffing my frustration for so long, when he called me into that meeting, that one day, I decided to let him have it. And everything that I had been burying, it was verbal vomit. It was ugly. No, I was out of a job shortly thereafter. Looking back, I think my anger was justified. But I also acknowledge that I did not express it or resolve it appropriately. After I parted ways from him and the company, I carried that bitterness and I carried that resentment for a very long time. So much so that I sank into an extremely deep depression. And I became isolated from my friends. I became isolated from my family. And I became isolated from church. It wasn't until long after, when by God's grace and mercy, he put it on my heart that I just needed to forgive this man. And honestly, he was just the tip of the iceberg. He barely had anything to do with the whole thing. But it wasn't until I decided to finally forgive him that I was able to find my way back to healing. Unresolved anger can destroy us. It can destroy us physically. It can destroy us emotionally. It can destroy us socially. It can destroy us spiritually. We have to keep in mind that anger is a physiological response, right? Unresolved anger is akin to being in fight or flight mode in perpetuity. It's akin to experiencing chronic stress. And this leads to a variety of consequences, right? The effects can be physical in nature. It can include things like muscle strain, digestive issues, ulcers, headaches. Emotionally, bitterness, resentment, anxiety, depression. Socially, it can lead to broken relationships, performance issues at work, isolation, right? And spiritually, it also means often distancing yourself from God, distancing yourself from church, people who love you. If we don't address the anger, right, we run the risk of becoming an angry person. That was me. I became an angry person during that season in my life. Okay, so we covered the pitfalls of unresolved anger. We covered how to resolve anger quickly and how to do it with determination. And now Ruby is going to walk us through the Fighting Fair tool that was presented in the book.
Thanks, Faye, for sharing your very personal story there. It's a thank you for the gift. All right, so this sentence here made me chuckle when I first read it. To disagree is one thing. To be disagreeable is another. So what does it mean? We unpack the section in Chip's book. Basically it means, in other words, don't avoid conflict or arguments, but do know how to fight fair. For me, that was very liberating. I used to think and feel very deflated whenever Christian and I get into fights, right? Because of our different anger profiles, our fights are generally non-constructive. And I feel like we've failed every time we fight. And I just want to avoid it as much as possible because it didn't feel good. But, guys, fighting is okay. Fighting is okay. It's not a bad word. It's not you failed in your marriage or your relationships. But we're going to get hands-on about how to fight fair in the next few minutes. Grab your boxing gloves. Next. Thank you. But before you get into the ring, ask yourself these 3 questions first. Why am I angry? So we talked about there are right and wrong reasons to be angry. And that first step is super important, to pause and really think whether you know the reason that you're angry and discern, check your motives. Am I willing to listen in the next few minutes, right? Am I willing to listen? Am I willing to be wrong? So is the goal of this fight to connect at the end, or is it to win? If your goal is to win, maybe this is not the right time to get into that fight. It will keep you from fighting fair, no matter how much intention you have to fight fair. So I probably, most of the time, just want to win that argument. So this is something that I need to practice. Now, let's get into the 16 rules of fighting fair, which you have a huge table. 16. There's a huge table on your handout. All right. It doesn't mean you have to do all 16 all at once and master all that today. We're not going to go through it one by one on stage either. Are you floored by the 16? We'll be pairing you up with your spouse, and you're going to have some chances to dive into it in a minute here. But what I put on the slide here is a few things, more than a few things, that I think I need to work on. And I broke it into 2 sections. On the left-hand side, I kind of related to it as like a heart and mind thing. Like, what is in my heart? And what is my mindset? And then the right-hand side is kind of more on action in words, right? Action and words. And so in the 16 rules that you have, it kind of doesn't really, have a order to it. So that's how I made sense of it and teasing out the ones that stood out to me. I struggle a lot with the present issue only one. That one really spoke to me. Going back to that teak table example, like when I want to fight about something that Christian is not doing for me, didn't deliver a promise, I would think about all the things he didn't do for the last 14 years. And then I would then project that he's never going to deliver his promise for the next 14 years. And that will all come up in the fight, right? In my spiel. And I don't even know what take over me, but I'll basically just live in, my entire life's timeline in one fight. So that's one that I have to really stay in, like, don't scope creep in your fight, And the other thing that I have to work on a lot as a spewer and an extrovert in a thunderstorm and all that things you put on profile is to listen. When I'm in a conflict mode, it's really hard for me to shut up and listen. Very hard. And so hence the question on the previous page, am I willing to listen? Like, that's something that I have to remind myself to do before getting to something like this, a conflict. But don't avoid it. All right, so couples exercise. Next 10 minutes. Now you get to have the fun with your spouse. And we'll give you maybe not 10, maybe 12, because for the first 2 minutes, please take some time individually to digest the table, right? There's 16 of it, so you probably have to think about it and look at it for a couple minutes. And then break it up, and then take 5 minutes each to answer these 2 questions. If you can advance. Think about a recent fight you had with your spouse. Now, if too many comes to mind, just pick one. And you don't have to pick the same one either. Just one that kind of remained in your mind. And ask yourself, what would you have done differently to fight more fairly, and fair being defined by the 16 rules on your end? And what aspect of fighting fair would you commit to work on with the help from God? I'll give you a bonus one, the second one. Also ask, it's not on the slide, but also ask your spouse what they would pick for you. Now, don't question the why. Not right now anyway, not in this class. That can come later, but just accept it from what they say, okay? Just take their word for it for now. All right, so we'll break up. I'll leave these questions on the screen. Any questions? Yes. So the third question is actually the second question, but asking your spouse for that answer. Have them, what they think you should work on. Because you're going to tell them, you remember that fight that we had the other day about blah, blah, blah? Well, I could have done this more fairly in retrospect. And then this is what I'm going to work on. Pick the present issue. Listen better, whatever that is for you. But then ask your spouse, what do you think? And let them tell you. Hopefully they'll keep it to just a few as well. That's top of mind. And then you switch. 5 minutes each. Take the first couple minutes, though, to digest. So we will set any other questions about this exercise. And if you're not here with your other half, maybe you can pair with somebody who also came on their own. You don't have to ask them what you need to work on in that case. Hopefully you don't have to answer for that either. I don't know if we can get some help, Stephanis, to get a clock set for like 12 minutes. And then we will bring you back after that. Sounds good?